When I tell you that Donald Trump is the most dangerous person to America right now that is on the planet, I'm not lying to you. And this is not just my opinion. This is the opinion of people who know him best, people who have worked for him and worked with him. They're sending all types of warning signs to us. The question is everyone listening? Does everyone believe these people when they tell us that Donald Trump is an existential threat to our nation? This election is about more than Kamala Harris, any issues anyone may have with her, or it's more important than the economy, inflation, immigration, or anything that Trump tries to use to distract us. This is about the well-being of our country. We must do everything we can at the polls in less than 2 weeks to keep this man from being reelected. That's what I want to talk about in this video. I'm going to show you some things that, again, people who know him best have said about him recently. Stay with me. Now, before we get into what I want to share with you today, go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice: How Public Schools Fail African American Males. If you have a Black son in public school, you need this book because I discuss how they mistreat African American males and what you can do about it. So hurry over to Amazon.com and grab your copy today. All right, so let's get into this. I'm going to show you two people that we know from seeing them in Donald Trump's administration who have said that this man is very dangerous, the most dangerous person to this country. And they say that because they confirm that Trump is a fascist. Now, what I want to do before we look at what they have said is I want to share with you a definition of what fascism is. All right, it's important that you understand the definition of fascism. Now, this gentleman that you see on the screen here, his name is Jason Stanley. He wrote a very good book entitled How Fascism Works. And he gave us a definition of fascism. All right. He says, I have chosen the label fascism for ultranationalism of some variety, ethnic, religious, cultural, with the nation represented in the person of an authoritarian leader who speaks on its behalf. So let's just unpack that a little bit. So he defines fascism as ultranationalism. That's extreme nationalism. That is when a country has promoted the nation above everything. And that nation, that national interest that it has promoted to an extreme degree can be based around ethnicity, religious, or cultural aspects. In this instance, what we're seeing here in America is white nationalism. All right? Extreme white nationalism. You also could describe this as white Christian nationalism. So that's the movement that Donald Trump represents. It is a fascist movement. It is a movement that lifts white nationalism to extreme levels. And again, he is on top of that movement. He calls it MAGA. And there is an agenda to promote that movement, which is called Project 2025. So again, fascism is ultranationalism or extreme nationalism, in this case, around ethnicity, white ethnicity to be specific. And it has another element, and that is it is represented in the form of one person, one authoritarian person, one autocratic person, or one dictatorial person. In this instance, that would be Donald Trump. Now, we have seen similarities between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler, both fascists. We saw Adolf Hitler promote extreme German nationalism and Donald Trump promoting extreme white nationalism. Both of them shared a love for dictatorships. Trump wants to be a dictator. Hitler was a dictator. So there are striking similarities between what Trump is trying to do and what Hitler actually did do. We have seen and heard Trump express his yearnings to be a strong man, and that's not a compliment. And nor does it mean alpha male. No, we have heard him express his yearnings to be a dictator. He said it. Sean Hannity asked him, are you going to be a dictator? Do you really want to be a dictator? And he said, at least for one day. What more do you need to hear? We don't want to live under a dictatorship. We are a democracy. We enjoy being a democracy where everyone has the right, pursuant to the First Amendment, to express themselves, to protest, under the Second Amendment, to own arms, under the Fourth Amendment, to be free from government tyranny, under the Fifth Amendment, not to be forced to incriminate ourselves, on and on and on. Trump wants to take all of that away from us. With him, again, at the helm. This is an extremely dangerous proposition, folks. Extremely dangerous. And again, don't take it from me. Take it from the folks that I'm getting ready to show you, things that they said here recently and in the past. So let's begin with General Milley, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was over all of the military. He was basically the liaison between the Trump administration and the military. So he was really close to Trump in the sense of being one of the most important people in Trump's administration. Now, he contributed to a book that Bob Woodward wrote entitled War. I have read most of that book, and it is a great book. I recommend that you go get a copy. Now, here's what Bob Woodward recorded General Milley as saying. 2 days later, on Monday, March 6, 2023, this wasn't very long ago, I attended a reception at the Willett Hotel in Washington, D.C. We got to talk. This is General Milley. This is in quotations. General Milley says, we got to talk to Bob Woodward. Said as I approached him, Milley was not in uniform, but wearing a fashionable dark sports coat and plaid shirt. He had a freshly showered look, and he seemed relaxed, though he stood barrel-chested with the ramrod straight posture of an Army general. Milley was still worried about Trump. Quote, no one has ever been as dangerous to this country as Donald Trump, close quote, Milley said. Now, keep in mind, this man served the country as a general for decades and then became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff under Donald Trump. And he says, no one has ever been as dangerous to this country as Donald Trump. That's what he said to Bob Woodward, knowing that Bob, as a journalist, would share this most likely with the country. And he went on to say, do you see what this man is? I glimpsed it when I talked to you back for peril, but I now know it. Close quote. So Milley says he is essentially everything I feared. Now Milley goes on to say, we have got to stop him, close quote. Milley said this to Bob Woodward. Again, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one of the most important persons in Trump's administration. He's seen him up close and personal and began to fear the danger that he poses to our nation. He goes on to say, you have got to stop him. By you, he meant the press broadly. He is the most dangerous person ever. I had suspicions when I talked to you about his mental decline and so forth, but now I realize he's a total fascist. He is the most dangerous person to this country. His eyes darted around the room filled with 200 guests of the Cohen Group, a global business consulting firm. So I want you to understand that this is General Milley. This is not me. This is not Augustus Corbett. This is General Milley, who served under Trump, who probably saw him on a daily basis, saw him operate, listened to his thoughts, heard Trump's fears, heard his ramblings, heard all of that. And he came out of that saying, this is the most dangerous person to this country. He is a total fascist. That is exactly what Milley said about Donald Trump. Again, I'm not making this up. I didn't say it. I agree with it, and I knew it before Milley finally confirmed it. But this is coming out of Milley's mouth, okay? This is coming from him. Again, he says he is the most dangerous person to this country. All right, that's Milley. He goes on to say, Cohen and former Defense Secretary James Mattis spoke at the reception. A fascist to the core, Milley repeated to me. I will never forget the intensity of his worry. He says Trump is a fascist to the core, which essentially means that he wants to be the dictator, the authoritarian, the autocrat that sits over a white, extreme nationalist country. Now, these black men who are planning on and who have already voted for Trump, I doubt that they even understand what fascism is. I doubt that they understand what Milley said to Bob Woodward, because I doubt that they've read the book. So basically, we have to just write them off. The rest of us must protect our country from Trump and this white nationalist movement. And these are white people who are saying these things. I want you to understand that too. And it's not lost on me that Milley is probably a white supremacist himself. Otherwise, he would have never agreed to work for Trump. So when he comes out and says what he's saying that this man is so far off the chain, he's more than what I can handle. He's more than what I can deal with. And he's just one of many people who worked for him. Most notably has to be Mike Pence, Trump's former vice president. I mean, isn't that something? Trump had to go get another vice presidential nominee to run with him because his first vice president wouldn't do so. And this one that he got now does not have the principles that Mike Pence has, because Pence stood. Again, a white supremacist, but he stood for the country. He put country before white supremacy and before being Trump's sycophant. But this guy, J.D. Vance, no, he'll do and say anything for Trump. And so will those others around him, like Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. All right? Who else has put us on notice about Donald Trump that worked for him? Well, that would be John Kelly, who was Trump's chief of staff. Now, if Trump has spent time with anyone, it was definitely John Kelly, General John Kelly, 4-star General John Kelly. And do also keep in mind that Kelly was, at that time, maybe the third chief of staff. Trump couldn't keep a chief of staff. All right? Or maybe the second. He had so many, I forget them. But I remember Mick Mulvaney. I remember Mark Meadows and John Kelly. So there have been 3, I think. I mean, Trump went through them like freaking T-shirts, because they all saw who he really is and would not continue to work for him. So John Kelly made some statements recently, this past week or past couple of days ago, about Trump's fascism in the New York Times. Let's look at what he said. Now, this is a New York Times article. In their book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, Peter Baker and Susan Glasser reported that Trump asked John Kelly, his chief of staff at the time, "Why can't you be like the German generals?" He's talking about the generals who served under Hitler. Trump wanted Hitler's type generals who would basically do anything he said. He said that to John Kelly, reportedly. Trump at various points had grown frustrated with military officials he deemed disloyal and disobedient. I'll throw in the mix General Mattis. Do you remember him? He was the Secretary of Defense under Trump before, I think, Mark Esper, and then he ended up with a third Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller. I mean, he was literally going through these people who would come on to work for him. They agreed with his white supremacist policies, but he was too much even for them. So General Mattis also said that Trump fit the description of a fascist. All right, let's keep reading. Throughout the course of his presidency, Trump referred to flag officers as my generals. My generals. Why do you call them my generals? Because he wanted to have generals under his thumb like Kim Jong-un of Korea, or Putin in Russia, or Xi in China, under his thumb. And that's what he will have this time if this country reelects him. This is what he'll have because he's purged all those other people out. And it was Kamala Harris who said today, Trump will not have a John Kelly or General Mattis or these other folks who tried to keep him on the right course. All right. So this goes on to say, Kelly explained to Trump that German generals tried to kill Hitler 3 times and almost pulled it off. This correction did not move Trump to reconsider his view. No, no, no. They were totally loyal to him, the president responded. So he wanted John Kelly to be completely loyal to him. He wanted to have the military completely under his control. That's not the way our country operates. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but he's not a dictator. He cannot become a dictator. We cannot allow him to become a dictator with control of the military, and might I add, with absolute immunity from the United States Supreme Court. Are you following what I'm trying to get you to see here? And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to say that we got less than 2 weeks to make sure this man does not become the president of the United States because we're going out to vote in record numbers. Don't just go to the polls. Take people to the polls. Run to the polls. All right? All right, let's go back. So this article goes on to say, well, looking at the definition, all right, in response to a question about whether he thought Mr. Trump was a fascist, Mr. Kelly first read aloud a definition of fascism that he found online. Quote, well, looking at the definition of fascism, it's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist, political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. That is exactly who Trump is. He believes in all of these things, all of this, far-right, a far-right authoritarianism, a far-right authoritarian, meaning very racist, very extreme conservative, very right-wing, super, not just your regular type of white supremacist, but one to the far end of the spectrum of white supremacy. And again, that's why it just doesn't make sense why black men would be supporting this and black women. I mean, Kamala on her worst day would be better than this. What is wrong with African-American people? Well, they've been listening to a lot of disinformation. And they don't read these things. They're not doing critical thinking. And so they're supporting this person. So dictatorial leader, he has expressed that. Centralized autocracy, the U.S. Supreme Court gave him that. Militarism, that's why he wants to control the military so it would be his military. Forcible suppression of opposition. We see how he attacks the media. We see how he goes after politicians that don't agree with him, and belief in a national social hierarchy. Yeah, one that has white people at the top of it. Mr. Kelly said that definition accurately described Mr. Trump. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kinds of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America, Mr. Kelly said. He added, certainly the former president is in the far-right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that, so he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist for sure. Now again, this is not coming just from me. This is coming out of the mouths of people who work for Trump, who again were a part of his far-right, white supremacist administration. But Trump was so much further to the right and racist and fascist and autocratic than even they were. So now they are ringing the bell as loud as they can. Well, I wouldn't say as loud as they can because they need to come out and get on the camera and hold a press conference before the election and tell the American people why we don't need to elect Donald Trump, to re-elect him, to ever again sit in the Oval Office and finish turning this country into an autocracy or a dictatorship or an authoritarian government that is fascist in nature. We don't need that. We don't want that. Again, Kamala on her worst day is better than Trump on his best day. Let me say it again. Kamala on her worst day is better than Trump on his best day. We need to keep this man out of office. Okay? I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Thank you for watching this video. Please share it, share it, share it, share it. Until the next time, peace.